Friedrich Fromm was not a man who sought glory. He was not a battlefield hero, nor a charismatic commander adored by the troops. Instead, he built his career through something far more valuable to the Nazi regime: efficiency, loyalty, and the ability to turn the vast machinery of the German army into a perfectly functioning engine of war. And for years, that made him one of the most powerful, yet least understood figures of the Third Reich. Born in Berlin in 1888, Fromm entered the military long before Hitler rose to power. Unlike many officers of his generation, he did not romanticize war or cling to old Prussian ideals. He was a realist, cold, calculating, and deeply pragmatic. He believed in systems, organization, and discipline above all else. It was these traits that allowed him to rise steadily through the ranks during the interwar years as Germany rebuilt its military infrastructure in secret, defying the Treaty of Versailles. By the late 1930s, Fromm had become a master of logistics and administration, a man who understood the inner workings of the military more intimately than many frontline generals. He wasn't a man who inspired, but he was a man who delivered results. And in Hitler's Germany, that made him indispensable. In 1939, on the eve of the Second World War, Fromm received the position that would define his legacy: Commander-in-Chief of the Replacement Army, Ersatzheer. This was no ordinary command. It meant he controlled the training, mobilization, replenishment, and deployment of millions of soldiers across the German war machine. Every division fighting on the Eastern Front relied on the replacement army to stay alive. Every new regiment that formed passed through Fromm's system. He became the hidden architect behind Germany's ability to wage a war of such massive scale. Historians often describe him as the most powerful man most people have never heard of. And it's true. Fromm wielded enormous influence, but preferred to operate silently, carefully, and without drawing attention to himself. He avoided political entanglements within the Nazi leadership, kept his distance from ideological fanatics, and focused entirely on military necessity.
Fromm, in a regime dominated by loud, aggressive personalities, Fromm remained faceless and unreadable. But this cold neutrality came with a cost. In the shadows of Berlin, a small group of military officers, including Claus von Stauffenberg, began plotting to assassinate Hitler and overthrow the regime. They needed resources, authorization, and access to the massive apparatus of the replacement army. And all of that ran through one man, Friedrich Fromm. Here, the historical debate begins. Some historians argue that Fromm sympathized with the conspirators, or at least believed that the war was lost and that Hitler's downfall was inevitable. Others say he was entirely self-interested, watching both sides carefully and waiting to see which one offered the safest path for survival. But one thing is clear: Fromm knew more than he admitted. He sensed unrest, he sensed dissent, and yet he remained silent. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was hesitation, or maybe it was the calculation of a man who had spent his life carefully avoiding risk. Whatever the reason, his neutrality would soon become the trap that sealed his fate. And before we go deeper, before we move into the conspiracy, the betrayal, and the execution, let me ask you for one small thing. This video is not free. The price is simple: subscribe, like, comment, or share. That's your ticket into the next part of this story. And trust me, it only gets darker from here. Because as the plot against Hitler took shape, Friedrich Fromm found himself standing at the crossroads of loyalty, survival, and treason. And whichever direction he chose, he was doomed. If the plot to kill Hitler had a headquarters, it wasn't a secret bunker or a smoky tavern where rebels whispered treason. It was a clean, orderly, bureaucratic office in the Bendler block, the headquarters of the replacement army. The building itself was unremarkable, but inside its quiet corridors, a revolution was being planned. It was the perfect front: thousands of officers, constant movement, endless paperwork. No one would suspect that this fortress of military routine was hiding traitors. And at the top of it all sat Friedrich Fromm. To the conspirators,
Fromm was both a potential savior and a deadly threat. His signature alone could activate Operation Valkyrie, the emergency mobilization plan originally designed to crush internal uprisings. If Hitler was assassinated, this same plan, turned against the regime, would allow the army to seize control of the government. It could work only through the machinery Fromm commanded. But Fromm was not a conspirator. He was a survivor. Claus von Stauffenberg, blinded in one eye and missing a hand from a battlefield wound, was a man transformed by war. He was charismatic, idealistic, and burning with conviction that Hitler must be stopped before Germany was annihilated. Others around him, Ludwig Beck, Friedrich Olbricht, Henning von Tresckow, had reached the same conclusion through horror, shame, or disillusionment. Together, they formed the core of the German resistance inside the army. And Fromm? He did nothing. But that nothing was not ignorance. Stauffenberg worked directly under him. Valkyrie orders were typed in his own offices. Meetings took place a few doors away. The conspirators used his authority daily. Testimonies from multiple officers later claimed he knew enough to act, or enough to be complicit. Yet Fromm refused to choose a side. Why? Some historians argue he secretly agreed with the conspirators' goals but lacked courage. Others believe he rejected their plans outright, fearing failure. And some suggest he was simply waiting, watching for the outcome before committing. His alleged statement to a subordinate became infamous. "If the bomb succeeds, tell me. If it does not, I was never involved." Cold, ambiguous, and revealing. By early 1944, Germany was collapsing. The Eastern Front had become a slaughterhouse. The Allies were tightening their grip in the West. Air raids devastated the cities. Even loyal officers began questioning Hitler's sanity and his orders. The conspirators understood something crucial. Without Fromm, the coup would fail. But without Hitler's death, Fromm would never support them. This stalemate created the perfect storm of tension inside the Bendler bloc. Stauffenberg pushed forward with preparations. Orders were forged. Lists were made. Loyalist officers were quietly identified as potential threats. Weapons were smuggled in. And all the while, Fromm sat in his office, a silent giant whose eventual decision would determine either the failure or success of the entire operation. When the morning of July 20th arrived, Stauffenberg left for the Wolf's Lair, carrying the bomb that was meant to change history. Fromm went about his day as usual. But the walls of neutrality were closing in. And once the explosion echoed through Hitler's headquarters, silence was no longer an option. The explosion at the Wolf's Lair sent shockwaves across the Reich, political and literal. But in Berlin, the first reaction wasn't chaos, it was confusion. Rumors swirled, communications were disrupted, reports contradicted each other. And inside the Bendler bloc, the man who should have given decisive orders, Friedrich Fromm, froze. Stauffenberg, convinced Hitler was dead, raced back to Berlin to initiate the coup. But Fromm refused to act without confirmation. His instincts told him to wait. His career depended on it. His survival depended on it. This hesitation would change everything. When Stauffenberg finally arrived and declared Hitler dead, the conspirators seized control. They locked Fromm in his own office, a stunning reversal of power. Using his authority, they activated Operation Valkyrie, sending orders across Germany to mobilize reserve units and neutralize the SS. For several hours, the coup worked. Confusion reigned. Army units mobilized. SS detachments were arrested. The regime trembled. But by 7 p.m., the fatal news arrived. Hitler was alive. Once loyal officers realized the truth, they sided with the regime. Communications to the Bendler bloc were cut. Loyalist units approached the building. Tension exploded into panic. Inside the Bendler bloc, power shifted again.
Loyal officers freed Fromm, and the man who spent years avoiding decisions suddenly made the most brutal one of his life. He convened an impromptu, illegal court-martial that lasted only minutes. No defense, no evidence, no legal authority, just vengeance, or an attempt to save himself. He sentenced Claus von Stauffenberg,
Friedrich Olbricht, Werner von Haften, and Albrecht Merz von Quernheim to death. Minutes later, under the harsh glare of headlights, they were executed in the courtyard. The shots echoed through the night and sealed Fromm's fate. Fromm believed that executing the conspirators would prove his loyalty. He miscalculated spectacularly. Goebbels and Himmler immediately saw through his actions. He acted too quickly, too independently, too desperately. The regime suspected, correctly, that he was hiding something. On Hitler's orders, Fromm was arrested. He had shot the only people who could testify about his role, and the regime interpreted that as guilt. They were right. Fromm was not a conspirator, but he was not innocent either. During months of interrogation, he denied everything. Documents vanished. Witnesses contradicted each other. His involvement, real or imagined, became part of the regime's paranoia. Finally, in March 1945, he was sentenced to death. The man who executed traitors was executed as a traitor. History struggles to categorize Friedrich Fromm. Was he a coward? A pragmatist? A secret sympathizer? A selfish opportunist? A victim of circumstance? The truth lies in the gray. He did not join the resistance. He did not report the resistance. He tried to stand in the middle and was crushed from both sides. After the war, historians attempted to reconstruct his role, but records were missing or destroyed. Testimonies contradict each other. His actions can be interpreted a dozen different ways. What remains clear is this: Fromm was the embodiment of the German officer corps' greatest failure: loyalty to the institution above loyalty to morality. He protected the army, not the nation. He avoided politics while serving a political regime. And when the moment came to act decisively, he chose survival over conviction. He saved no one. He helped no cause. He died alone, uncelebrated, and largely forgotten. Today, the Bendlerblock courtyard is a memorial. Visitors stand where Stauffenberg fell. Plaques honor the men who dared to defy tyranny. Flowers are placed. Names are remembered. But one name is missing: Friedrich Fromm. His story is a warning, not of treason, but of neutrality. Not of rebellion, but of inaction. He was close enough to greatness to touch it, but too afraid to take the step that mattered. His life reflects the tragedy of countless German officers who saw the truth yet did nothing, who feared the consequences of opposition more than the consequences of obedience. In the end, history showed them that choosing nothing is still a choice. If you found this story compelling, explore the darker corners of the Third Reich in our next video, where we examine the life of Arthur Niebe, the SS officer who tried to kill Hitler. Thank you for watching. See you in the next episode.